On January 12, 2026, the world was jolted awake by a single electrifying social media post from Donald Trump. In a move that no one saw coming, Trump took to his favorite platform and sent shockwaves across the globe. With a few bold words, he declared himself the acting president of Venezuela, instantly igniting a firestorm of controversy and confusion. The announcement was crafted to go viral, a fake Wikipedia screenshot complete with Trump's presidential portrait and a fabricated start date for his supposed tenure. The image was so convincing that, for a moment, even seasoned journalists paused to double-check their sources. Within minutes, the post was everywhere, shared, retweeted, and debated in every corner of the internet. The line between political theater and actual policy blurred as governments and newsrooms scrambled to respond to the unprecedented declaration. No official government or international body recognized Trump's claim. But the sheer audacity of the move was impossible to ignore. It was a statement that demanded attention, regardless of its legitimacy. The timing was no accident. Just days earlier, a covert operation had ousted Venezuela's long-standing president, Nicolas Maduro, leaving the nation in chaos and its leadership in question. Trump's declaration wasn't just a symbolic gesture or a social media stunt. It was a calculated move to fill the sudden power vacuum and assert direct U.S. influence over Venezuela's future. The implications for the region and for global politics were immediate and profound. By bypassing traditional diplomatic channels and going straight to the public, Trump signaled a new, aggressive U.S. policy toward Venezuela, one that would play out in real time, on the world stage for all to see. The world was left reeling, unsure whether this was a genuine intervention, a publicity stunt, or something even more unpredictable. Analysts, politicians, and citizens alike debated the true meaning behind Trump's viral declaration. The White House wasted no time. In a series of press briefings, officials confirmed that this was not a joke or a rogue tweet. It was the cornerstone of a bold, new American strategy in Latin America. At the center of it all was Trump himself, orchestrating every move, determined to reshape Venezuela's destiny under American supervision and to leave his mark on history. As the world watched, the stage was set for a foreign policy storm, one that would test alliances, challenge norms, and redefine the boundaries of power in the 21st century. Trump's declaration set the stage for one of the most dramatic U.S. military operations in recent history. Under the cover of darkness, elite American forces launched a swift and highly coordinated mission, stunning the world with its speed and precision. The operation was shrouded in secrecy, with only a handful of top officials aware of the full plan until the very last moment. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were apprehended in a lightning-fast raid, then immediately flown under heavy guard to a New York courthouse. The images of a sitting president in handcuffs surrounded by armed security sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and ignited a media firestorm. The U.S. justified the unprecedented action as a law enforcement operation, pointing to years-old charges of narco-terrorism and corruption. Officials argued that Maduro's alleged crimes had long threatened not just Venezuela, but the stability of the entire region. American officials claimed Maduro's regime had transformed Venezuela into a narco-state, funneling drugs and illicit funds across borders, and posing a direct threat to U.S. national security. They insisted that decisive action was the only way to dismantle the criminal networks embedded within the Venezuelan government. Speaking defiantly from detention, Maduro denounced the operation as a brazen kidnapping and an act of imperialism. He insisted the charges were fabricated, a thinly veiled excuse for the U.S. to seize control of Venezuela's vast oil reserves and undermine its sovereignty. The world watched in disbelief as, for the first time in decades, a sitting head of state was forcibly removed by a foreign power. News outlets scrambled to cover the unfolding crisis, while diplomats at the United Nations debated the legality and consequences of the operation. The operation immediately raised urgent questions about sovereignty, international law, and the limits of U.S. power. Legal scholars and world leaders alike warned that such actions could set a dangerous precedent for future interventions. U.S. officials, however, remained steadfast, framing the mission as a necessary step to dismantle a sprawling criminal enterprise that had corrupted an entire nation and threatened global stability. Critics, both at home and abroad, saw the operation as a blatant power grab, an aggressive move that undermined international norms and risked plunging the region into chaos. The image of Maduro in U.S. custody quickly became a symbol of the new geopolitical conflict, fueling protests and fierce debate across the globe. In Caracas, the power vacuum was immediate and profound. Government offices stood empty, the presidential palace abandoned, and the streets filled with uncertainty and fear. With Maduro gone, the U.S. had set the stage for direct intervention, deploying military assets and preparing for a possible escalation as the world watched anxiously. Around the globe, governments and citizens braced for the fallout, uncertain of what the next days would bring, and fearful of a wider conflict. Venezuela's fate now hung in the balance, its future clouded by turmoil, foreign intervention, and the hopes and fears of millions. With Maduro gone, Trump wasted no time, announcing that the United States would step in to temporarily govern Venezuela. The world watched as the White House declared this move a necessary step to prevent instability and chaos from spreading across the region. Trump argued that only American oversight could prevent Venezuela from descending into a failed state right on America's doorstep. He painted a picture of looming disorder, warning that without U.S. intervention, violence, mass migration, and economic collapse could spill over into neighboring countries and threaten U.S. interests. He insisted this was a temporary measure, designed to stabilize Venezuela and pave the way for free, fair elections. Trump promised that the U.S. would help restore order, rebuild institutions, and ensure that the Venezuelan people could soon choose their own leaders in a democratic process. Central to his plan was U.S. control of Venezuela's vast oil industry. Trump emphasized that managing these resources was essential, not just for economic recovery, but to prevent corrupt officials from siphoning off the nation's wealth. He claimed that American management of oil revenues would fund Venezuela's recovery and ensure that profits benefited ordinary citizens, not the political elite or criminal networks that had flourished under previous regimes. But critics quickly pointed out a glaring conflict of interest. Was this truly a humanitarian mission, or simply a strategic move to seize control of the world's largest oil reserves? Editorials and analysts questioned whether American promises of democracy masked deeper ambitions. Under the new arrangement, the U.S. would manage oil sales, control the flow of revenue, and oversee the reconstruction of Venezuela's shattered infrastructure. American companies and officials took leading roles in these efforts, raising further questions about who truly stood to benefit. Trump's message was clear: only American stewardship could guarantee stability and a brighter future for Venezuela. He framed the intervention as a moral duty, a responsibility to protect both Venezuelans and the wider hemisphere. Yet, the move blurred the line between intervention and outright occupation. U.S. military presence on Venezuelan streets sparked protests and fueled fears of a long-term foreign takeover. Allies and adversaries alike questioned U.S. motives, debating whether this was a genuine effort to help or a calculated power play. The international community demanded answers and accountability. Trump's boldness left no doubt. The United States was now firmly in charge, reshaping Venezuela's future according to its own vision. The world watched, wary and uncertain, as history unfolded in real time, wondering what the true cost of American control would be for Venezuela and beyond. In Caracas, Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's vice president, emerged as interim president, vowing to resist U.S. intervention. She denounced Trump's claim as a fantasy and demanded Maduro's release. Rodriguez called on the military and public to defend Venezuela's sovereignty. Her government rejected all American authority, rallying loyalists and state institutions. Rodriguez became the face of national resistance, framing the U.S. action as an attack on Venezuelan independence. Her fiery rhetoric galvanized supporters and deepened the standoff. The U.S. now faced a determined, organized opposition. Venezuela was no longer a simple power vacuum, it was a battleground for legitimacy. Two rival governments claimed authority, each backed by powerful allies. The struggle for control had only just begun. The world reacted swiftly and harshly to the US intervention. China and Russia condemned the move as a violation of sovereignty and a threat to their interests. Even US allies like Colombia and Spain voiced concern, urging a return to diplomacy. Critics warned that forcibly removing a leader set a dangerous precedent. The Trump administration dismissed the backlash, insisting its actions were necessary for security and humanitarian reasons. The principle of sovereignty was at the heart of the global outcry. The US stood isolated, defending its bold gamble. Trump quickly pivoted to Venezuela's oil, inviting US companies to invest billions in rebuilding the sector. He made it clear, only American firms would control Venezuela's oil future, sidelining China and Russia. The plan promised profits for allies and consequences for opponents. Trump warned, Delcy Rodriguez, cooperate or face severe repercussions. Economic leverage and threats became the tools of US strategy. The message was unmistakable. Work with the US or be left behind. Trump aimed to make American oversight the only viable path forward. Trump announced a major oil deal with Venezuela's interim leadership, 50 million barrels to the US, with more to come. The agreement was touted as a win-win. Revenue for Venezuela, lower prices for Americans. An executive order ensured US control over the oil revenue, blocking access by Rodriguez's government. But the identity of the interim leadership was murky, fueling criticism that the US was making deals with its own appointees. Critics called it a self-serving arrangement, extracting resources under the guise of aid. The deal deepened questions about legitimacy and control. In Washington, it was celebrated as a strategic victory. In Caracas, it was seen as exploitation. Amid the crisis, Delcy Rodriguez's government announced the release of political prisoners, a rare positive development. Rodriguez framed it as a peace gesture. Trump claimed it was proof his pressure campaign was working. The move offered hope to families and human rights advocates. The timing suggested both humanitarian motives and strategic calculation. Rodriguez sought international sympathy. Trump claimed victory. Regardless of motive, the releases marked a small step away from conflict. The world welcomed the gesture, even as tensions remained high. The crisis, however, was far from over. January 2026 marked a turning point in global politics. Trump's self-declaration and Maduro's removal shattered diplomatic norms. The US now directly controlled a foreign nation, challenging the principle of sovereignty. Two rival governments, one in Caracas, one in Washington, vied for legitimacy. The risk of civil conflict or prolonged stalemate loomed large. The world watched, uncertain whether this bold move would bring stability or disaster. Venezuela's fate, and the rules of international order, hung in the balance. A new, unpredictable chapter had begun,